Masechet Yevamot, Daf Peh Vav. We begin at the Mishnah at Peh He Amud Bet. This Mishnah is going to review many halachot that we've already seen in a nice summary form regarding when someone is married, who is married to a Kohen, then she can eat terumah. But now we're going to introduce Ma'aser. A Levi can eat Ma'aser. Someone who's married to a Levi can also eat Ma'aser. The Gemara is going to go into a wider discussion about who can eat Maaser. Maaser Rishon we're talking about. So for sure, Levi, that's who you give it to primarily. But what about a Kohen? Isn't Kohen also included in the family of a Levi? So presumably a Kohen can. What about a Yisrael? Is it like Tirumah? Tirumah has Kedusha, so that only a Kohen can eat it. There's no scenario where Yisrael can eat it unless he's in the household, like married to a Kohen. Otherwise, not. But how about Ma'aser? The halakha today is that Ma'aser is, even though it belongs monetarily to the Levi, is not Kodesh, and therefore, if a Levi wants to share it, or if someone cannot prove they're a Levi, and I have some food, I have to give it to that Levi, but I do have to separate it. But a Yisrael is in fact allowed to eat Maaser Rishon, except for the monetary part, which the Levi would have to grant or prove that he is deserving of it. All right, that we're going to see a lot more about Maaser. Let's start the Mishnah. Bat Yisrael me'oreset lekohen, me'oberet mi kohen, shoberet yabam lekohen, v'chen bat kohen Yisrael lo tochal bitruma. So the principle is that if a woman is married to a kohen, then she can eat terumah. But if there is not a marriage, but rather these other connections, if it's only erusin, but she's not yet living with the kohen, that's a problem. It's a problem with the Rabbanan. She's still living in her father's house. She's going to start, if she starts eating terumah there, other household members are going to come and share with her, and that'll be a problem. If she is pregnant from a kohen, let's say she got pregnant and then he died. So now she has to stop eating terumah until the baby's born. Once the baby's born, the baby will be a connection to the kohen, and she can restart. But while she's pregnant, no good. If she is a Yevamot awaiting yibum to a kohen during that time period, that yibum connection is not enough to consider them married, she cannot eat. And so too, Bat Kohen, if she is a Bat Kohen, and she has any of these relationships with Israel, if she's me'oreset to Israel, or she is pregnant from a Yisrael, or she is shomeret yavam to awaiting Yisrael, she cannot go back to her father's house as a Bat Kohen usually can, because she has this connection. So either way, cannot eat terumah. Now, next case. Bat Yisrael me'oreset leLevi, me'oberet mi-Levi, shomeret yavam le-Levi, v'chen bat Levi liYisrael lo tochal b'maaser. Bat Yisrael, if she's married to a Levi, she can go ahead and eat Maaser Rishon. But if she only had erusin to him, or she's bearing his child and then he dies, or they divorce, shomeret, or she's awaiting yibum with a Levi, no good. That's not enough of a connection. And the other way around, if she was a Bat Levi, so growing up, she was permitted to eat terumah, but once she gets engaged, does irusin with the Yisrael, or if she has is bearing a child from a Yisrael, so that removes her from her father's house, or she's waiting a zikah. So all these are these in-between statuses that remove her from both sides. And so no matter whether she is the Bat Levi, or he is the Levi, either way she cannot eat Maaser. All right, and now we have in the third case, Bat Levi me'oreset lekohen. Levi and Kohen, me'oberet mi-Kohen, shomeret yavam lekohen, v'chen bat Kohen leLevi lo tochal, lo betruma, v'lo b'maaser. So you have a Bat Levi, who while she's single, she can eat Maaser, but not Kohen, but not terumah. Now, if she does erusin to a kohen, now she sees she's in a double bind. On the one hand, because of this erusin, she's out of her father's house, so she cannot eat maaser on account of her father's house. But she is not yet married to the Kohen, and so therefore cannot yet have teruma. So she can't have either. Same thing with Me'obedet. She's bearing a child of a Kohen. She can't go back to her father's house. She's not connected to the Kohen. Or she's awaiting Zikah, Yibum, to a Kohen. Or the other way around, if she was a Bat Kohen, so growing up she could eat teruma in her father's house, but now that she is Me'oreset to a Levi, she has to stop eating teruma, but not married yet, so cannot yet eat the Maaser Rishon. Okay, so interesting cases. Now, question. Uteh zara milo achla b'maaser. Regarding the second case here, we have a Bat Yisrael who has Kiddushin with a Levi. And he says, she cannot eat this Maaser Rishon that goes to the Levi. Hold on. So what if she's a Zara? What if she's a foreigner? Foreigner means not a Kohen or not a Levi. So what? Can't a Zara eat Maaser? Meaning, can't anybody eat Maaser? What would be the problem? And this is so this is in fact the halakha today. Nowadays, if you live in Israel and you have to you have some a fruit, you have to take teruma maaser. Teruma you actually have to remove and throw out, because you can't give it to a kohen, because kohanim are temeim, so nobody can eat teruma. So a little bit, 2% you have to take and just throw out. But the rest of it, what do we do nowadays? Well, maaser, you have to separate. We're going to learn this now. If you don't separate, it's tebel. That's a serious problem. So you do have to separate it. And so you just take, you say this 10% over here, that's going to be Maaser Rishon. After you separate it though, you look around. Is anybody here that can prove they're a Levi? En kan Levi. Who can prove 100% that they're Levi? Let them come take it. But if they can't prove it, then who's going to have a family tree going back to Levi? And so therefore, after you separate it, a Yisrael can eat the Maaser Rishon. That's what we do nowadays. And that is, so that's one of the opinions. That's the opinion of Rabbanan. That's why we follow it. So assuming that, by the way, you don't actually have to physically separate it and count out exactly 10%. You could just look at a pile of fruit and say, the 10% on the right side of this pile, that'll be Maaser Rishon. The other half will be Maaser Sheni, and so on. And so even without just looking at it and designating it, that's enough to get it out of Tevel, be separated. Once it's separated, however, a Yisrael is allowed to eat Maaser. So since that's the widespread halacha, we don't understand this Mishnah that said that the Beit Yisrael has to stop eating Maaser. Why not? Eat Maaser all day long, even before she's engaged. Okay, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, Hamaneh Rabbi Meir, De Amar Maaser Rishon Asur Lezari. Must be that this Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. He's the more stringent than Rabbanan, and he says that Maaser Rishon Einan Kohen and non-Levi are not allowed to eat Maaser Rishon. Detanya, let's see his source. Teruma lekohen u'Maaser Rishon leLevi divrei Rabbi Meir. He makes it clear. Teruma goes to a Kohen and Maaser Rishon goes to a Levi. And just like a Yisrael cannot have teruma, a Yisrael cannot have Maaser Rishon. All right, it would look from these words, if you take them literally, that a Maaser Rishon goes only to a Levi. What about Maaser Rishon going to a Kohen? We're going to see later that he does say it is okay for a Kohen to eat Maaser Rishon. Although there is going to be another opinion that says no, Maaser Rishon only goes to Levi and not even to a Kohen. Okay, that's Rabbi Meir, and that would explain it. There is another opinion here that's a little bit looser. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah matiro lekohen. He says that you can give the Maaser Rishon to a Kohen. Now we ask, matiro mikladi kamanda asar. Wait, is there anybody who thinks that it's prohibited for a Kohen to eat it? To eat Maaser Rishon, ela emanot no after Kohen. No, what he means to say is that you can even give it lechatechila to a Kohen. You could give it to him directly. But you see from this discussion that everyone agrees that a Kohen can eat Maaser if, for example, a Levi gives it to him. All right, so just that Rabbi Meir thinks that you have to give Maaser Rishon to the Levi. It's his first. If a Levi wants to share it with the Kohen can eat it. But Israel cannot eat it. It's not just, it has holy status. And even if the Levi wants to share it, he cannot share it with the Israel. So they both agree with that. They only disagree regarding, can you give the Maaser Rishon directly a Kohen? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, yes, every Kohen is also subsumed under being a Levi. So you can do that. Okay, anyway, so we followed a Meir here, and that explains why while she's a Bat Yisrael, she cannot have it, Ma'aseh Rishon. And if she's Erusin to Levi, not yet enough. She has to have Nisuin to Levi, only then can she partake of Ma'aseh Rishon. Good. My Tamad Rabbi Meir. What's his source that prohibits Maaseh Rishon to a Yisrael? Amar Ravacha bered Rabba mishmeder Gemara. Ki et Maasar bnei Yisrael asher yarimu laHashem teruma. Pasuk in Bimidbar is talking about Maaser, because it says I give it to the Leviim, and it says Maasar bnei Yisrael, the 10th of that they give that to Hashem teruma. So you see, it calls Maaseh Rishon teruma. Why? Ma teruma asura lezarim, af ma'asar rishon, ma'aser rishon asura lezarim. To make an equivalent, just like teruma, a Yisrael cannot eat it, so to ma'aser rishon, a Yisrael cannot eat it. That's a source. Good. Now we question the source. Ima teruma chayavin alav mitav hachomesh, af ma'aser chayavin alav mitav hachomesh. If a Yisrael eats teruma, then he has a penalty. Or any non-Kohen who eats teruma has a penalty. If he does it on purpose, then chayav mitabi de shamayim. If by mistake he has to pay an extra 20% as a penalty. So since we're making an equivalent, should we say that Maaser also, if a Yisrael eats the Maaser Rishon, then he's chayav mitah, and he has to pay a fifth, right? Because you just made this equivalence. But that's not true. Amar keda umetu bo ki haleluhu v'yasav chamishito alav bo velo b'maaser alav velo b'maaser. So that's why we have another two pesukim here in Vayikra. That one of them says, "Shamaru b'shmati v'lo yiswa alav chet umetu bo ki echalelu ani Hashem mekadishchem." So this is talking about teruma. For a kohen, you have to be careful with it and don't make a sin, because if you make a sin, if you profane it, meaning if someone else eats it, umetu bo, they will die because of it. So it means only regarding teruma, but not maaser. So that's if you did it on purpose. And by mistake, alav. If someone eats yochal kodesh bishkaga, he has to add a fifth, which is actually 25%. It's a fifth of the total that you're going to pay. And you give it to the Kohen. So it says alav velo al maaseh. So this came in Vayikra come to exclude these punishments. So therefore we're left with just the one in Bimidbar that says that makes an equivalence. Okay, v'Rabbanan ma teruma tobelet af maaser rishon nami tobel. Now according to Rabbanan, who say that Yisrael can eat maaser rishon. So then what's the problem? Why would the pasuk here make an equivalence between Maaser Rishon and teruma? And the answer is, just like teruma, before you separate teruma, it's called tebel. And tebel, if you eat tebel, it's serious prohibition. So too, Maaser Rishon, before you take Maaser Rishon, it's also called tebel and prohibited. So the idea is as follows: even though after you separate the Maaser Rishon, then a Yisrael can eat both the regular produce and the Maaser Rishon. It belongs monetarily to the Levi, so you got to get his permission, but it's not Kodesh. You're allowed to eat it. But you do have to separate it, even if only designating it mentally, verbally. But beforehand, while it's mixed together, while it's tevel, it's prohibited. That's what he learns from it. Just like teruma is tebel before it's separated, so too, before you separate maaser, will also be tebel. Uchedetanya. And we know that this is true from the following baraita. Now, why do we need a baraita? We just brought a pasuk, okay? So remember this. This pasuk here that we learned it from is from the equivalence principle in Bimidbar. But now we're going to learn the same idea again from a couple of Pesukim and Devarim, and then after this Baraita, we're going to ask, why do we need both derivations? So here's the second one. So can it be, the Midrash asks, that when do I call something tebel and I'm liable if I eat tebel? That's only if I didn't remove anything at all. I didn't do anything. It's still fresh. But maybe as long as I took teruma gedolah, that's teruma goes to the Kohen, even if I didn't take maaser rishon, so now it's not tevel anymore. Or maybe if I did take maaser rishon, but I didn't yet take maaser sheni, it's no longer tevel. Or in other years, when I have to bring maaser ani, I only took maaser rishon, but left the maaser ani. In third and sixth year, when I have to bring maaser ani, how do I know that's still called tevel? I have to take everything out that I need to take out, that separate everything in order for it to be removed from the category of tebel. In 2 places in Devarim it says the word bisharecha. Now the second one, the second one's talking about removing in the third and sixth year the maaser, and it's talking about maaser ani. So therefore, the first one also must be talking about maaser ani. Af masharecha murkan maaser ani. V'amaracha mana lo tuchal. And what does it say? Do not eat it. What do you mean do not eat it? Do not eat it until it's separated. So there you go. This is another a place where we know something is called tevel until it's separated. Now this is the same law that Rabbanan derived from the pasuk in Bemidbar that said maaser is the same as teruma. So why do we need both? Answer is if I had only this one here in Devarim, I would think that this is only a prohibition of a lav. Aval mita lo, I wouldn't know it's a prohibition that's chayav mita. Kamash malan, if you eat tebel, no matter what, even if you took teruma and there's only maaser there, still called tebel and still would be chayav mita bidei shamayim. You have to remove everything, and so that's why we do that today. We'll designate. Okay, we take out the teruma physically, separate the rest of them by verbal designation. Now it's no longer tebel. Okay, what do you do with the maaser rishon, maaser sheni? That is a different question because it's no longer kadosh. It's just a question of monetary problem. Right, lishana charina. What we just said is in a slightly different version that comes to the same thing. Maaser rishon de tabil meder biyose nafka. How do we know that maaser rishon, if you didn't take out the maaser rishon, then it's called tebel? We know it from this braita of Rabbi Yosef, who learns it from the Pesukim and Devarim. And then we ask, Imahi havamina lelav avamita lo kamash malan. But if I only had it from here, then I will only know a lav. But I wouldn't know mita, and that's why I need the first pasuk. Okay. Next, B'mai okimta. Now we answered the question. We had a question on the Mishnah. What is the problem with the Yisrael eating maaser? Right? Why do they even have to be engaged? Even if they are engaged, they still can eat maaser. Oh, we're following the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Okay, so far so good. That solves the middle clause. But look at the sefa, which is going to be difficult. Ema sefa bat Levi meorestet the Kohen, ubat Kohen the Levi lo tocha lo betruma velo bemaaser. Hacha maizarut ika. He said here that a bat Levi she's meorestet to a Kohen and she cannot eat maaser. I understand why not teruma because they're not married yet, but why not maaser? She's a bat Levi, so growing up she could eat maaser, and now she's going to be married to a Kohen. And you just said, according to the Rabbi Meir, a Kohen is allowed to eat a maaser. Only Yisrael can eat maaser, right? And according to the Rabbi Meir, you can't give it directly to a Kohen. The Levi can share it with a Kohen, but the point is, a Kohen can eat maaser. So either way, she's coming from Levi. She's going to Israel. She's not a zad for maaser. She should be able to eat it. So this we cannot explain the last opinion here according to Rabbi Meir. Okay, a simple reading of the Mishnah, which is not what we're going to say. We're going to introduce now two difficult readings that are hard to fit into the words. A simple reading of the Mishnah is found in the Talmud Yerushalmi that says that our Mishnah is following the opinion that maaser rishon can only be given to a Levi and Kohanim cannot eat it. We're going to see this opinion in the name of Rabbi Akiva in a few minutes. And that would explain the Mishnah in a simple way. That's why the Bat Levi, she can eat maaser as a Bat Levi. Kohen cannot eat maaser. He gets teruma. That's it. He doesn't get maaser. All right, but the Bavli does not go that way. Instead, introduces a different answer. Amadav Sheshat, Mai ena ochelet dekatane ena notenet reshut litrom. When it says that the Bat Levi cannot eat, doesn't mean she cannot. She can eat. It means that she cannot give permission to a messenger, to a shaliach, to remove the terumah and maaser, because she also can't do it herself. Just more usually, she would probably send a messenger. She's back home in her father's house. She's not around. But even if she herself or a messenger cannot yet do this, because it's not authorized. I can't go and take terumah on behalf of someone else if it's not mine and it's not yet hers. Certainly, the terumah is not yet hers, so she cannot separate the terumah from the maaser on his behalf. Okay, that's what it's talking about. When she's married, she could. And so, yes, she can eat, so it could still be Rabbi Meir. She can eat the maaser, but she can't separate the terumah and maaser. Okay, that means if she's married, because the Mishnah only said meoreset, if she's married, then she can separate it herself and she can ask a messenger. And we say, yes, in v'hatanya, v'achatem oto b'chol makom atem u'batechem limed al nesuah bat yisrael shenotenet reshut litrom. Because it says you can eat it in every place, you and your household. We learn from here, the Braita says that someone who's married, nesuah, someone who married a Bat Israel, if she married a Levi, she would be allowed to go to the Maaser Rishon of the Levi and separate Terumah from it because she's married. So therefore, that's a sufficient connection that she can do that. But only as Meoreset, no, not yet. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. The Mishnah, the Baraita here continues and just questions this assumption. How do you know from this pasuk that it says that it means that she can separate it? Maybe it just means that she can eat. She can eat along with her husband. That she can eat maaser with her husband the Levi, because it says eating. It doesn't say anything about separating. So we answer at Amarta terumah chamora ochelet maaser akal lo kol sheken. We already know that a wife of a Kohen can eat terumah, and terumah is a more stringent law. So all the more so, kal vachomer, that the wife of a Levi can eat maaser. So I don't need a pasuk for that. So what's this pasuk coming to teach? Nu ela limed al nesuah bat yisrael shenotenet reshut litrom. So therefore, it must mean that if she's married, if a Bat Yisrael is married to a Levi, she can separate terumah from the maaser. Good. More bered Rabbana Amar Lomar Shen Holkin La Maaser Bebet HaGeranot. A different interpretation, a different answer to that question of what the third clause means, right? Once again, the question was, according to Rabbi Meir, can't maaser can be eaten by a Kohen. So what's the problem with the a Bat Levi who is betrothed to a Kohen? What's the problem with her eating maaser? She was allowed to eat maaser before, and the Kohen can also eat maaser. So either way, she can eat maaser. That was the question. So previously we just answered that no, it means that she cannot go and separate the terumah from the maaser of her husband, and she could not do that if she was a Bat Yisrael, not even if she's a Bat Levi, because she does not have access. She does not own sufficiently she's not together with her husband's property that she could just go do that on his behalf or send a messenger to do that on his behalf. So that was the problem. It was about separating, not about the eating. Okay, so now, but this answer is going to say something different. That she, lomar she'en holkin la maaser bebet hageranot. It means that she, this Bat Kohen, or Bat Levi, rather, Bat Levi, same should be true the other way around. This Bat Levi cannot go to the granary to collect the maaser herself. That's where when you're going to get maaser, you go to the granary. That's where they separate it. So you get it from the source. She cannot go there. Rather, the husband has to go there, and then he can give it to her. The Levi husband, the Kohen husband, can go to the granary to get it, and then she can eat it. But she cannot go and collect it. All right, let's see why. If the reason is because of yichud, if a woman goes and she is going to be collecting there, she might end up being alone in a room with the man over there. maybe the guy who's giving it out, there's no one else around, and that could lead to suspicion. So therefore, in all cases, no matter what, even if she was married, we wouldn't allow it. But the other opinion says the reason why she can't go is that a wife of a Kohen cannot go and collect, or the wife of a Levi cannot go and collect, is because she may become divorced. And once she is divorced, let's say she was a wife of a Kohen, and now at the granary they'll say they'll know, oh yes, she is the wife of this Kohen, so she can get terumah. But let's say she gets divorced, they don't read all the divorce papers of how everyone gets divorced. They're gonna assume she's still married to the Kohen, and they'll continue to give her terumah. Therefore they have to stop. Now that's why in general they say we don't give her maaser. But in this case, if since she's a bat Levi, and she can eat maaser anyway as a bat Levi, so once she marries the Kohen, she can go ahead and continue collect maaser, and even if she gets divorced, it won't be a problem because she'll go back to being a Levi and she can still have maaser. So in other words, according to the second reason, there's no reason for her ever to stop being able to collect grain from the granary, because no matter what her status is, she'll be permitted to go. According to the first reason, she can never go. But according to the second reason, she should always be able to go. So therefore, this reasoning would not explain why the Mishnah says that she cannot go to the granary while she is in the state of Erusin. So we'll answer this with another question. The same thing would be for a bat Kohen. She was a bat Kohen growing up, and now let's say she marries a Kohen. So can she go and take the and collect from the granary even if she gets divorced? So she's a bat Kohen. She can still eat terumah. Do we allow her to eat terumah? No, we don't. Why? Ela gezerah mishum gerusha bat Yisrael, because of a gezerah. We're not going to allow a bat Kohen to collect from the granary because then we'll end up allowing a bat Yisrael also, and the bat Yisrael will be a problem because while she can collect, she can eat terumah while she's married, not while she's divorced, and the people at the granary dispensing unit will not know that she got divorced. So therefore we say across the board, you know what? All wives cannot go and collect terumah. Or maaser, so the same reasoning here. That's why we also would not allow her to collect the maaser, right? Anyone who is who's married, or even Erusin, cannot go to the granary to collect, and that's what it's talking about. Okay, hold on. If those are the reasons, then why are you saying meoreset? Even someone married is not allowed, right? For either reason, if it's because of yichud, married people also, or if it's because they might get divorced and then they might go back to the original status, and we worry that of this case to a bat Yisrael, also of nisuah, no one, right? No married woman also cannot go ahead and collect from the granary. And we say, you're right, I did the Tanaresha Meoreset, Tananemesefa Meoreset. Since in the beginning of the Mishnah talked about the case of Erusin that had to, so too here we say Erusin, even though in fact it would be true for Nisuin as well. All right, next opinion. Tenura banan teruma lekohen u'maaser rishon liYisrael divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says teruma goes to a kohen and maaser rishon goes to a Levi. This was basically the same language as Rabbi Meir said before. Okay, Rabbi Elazar ben Azar Amer lekohen. Rabbi Elazar says that it goes to the Kohen. What do you mean? Le Kohen velo le Levi. It goes to only the Kohen. Maaser goes only Kohen. Maaser doesn't go to Levi. No, Emma after Kohen. It means also to a Kohen. Okay, good. My tamad Rabbi Akiva hadichtiv ved haLeviim tidaber v'amarta alehem bilviim kamishtae kera. So since the pasuk says to the Leviim say, and here you should say to them. Let's look at the pasuk in the original here. אשר נתתי לכם מאיתם בנחלתכם, ונמתם ממנו תרומת אדוני מעשר מן המעשר. It's talking about saying to the Leviim that when you take from Bnei Israel Ma'aser, so there you go. Then when you take that, you should also give the Terumah to the Kohanim. But the point is that the Leviim get the Ma'aser, only them, nobody else. Kohanim do not get the Ma'aser. So for this reason, I think that Rabbi Akiva disagrees with Rabbi Meir. Tosafot here says that they are equivalent. The machloket, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is the same as Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, but it seems better to say that Rabbi Meir, while he said that a Kohen can eat maaser, you can't give it to him directly, but he can eat it. It would seem from this statement and the following discussion that according to Rabbi Akiva, only a Levi can eat the maaser and not even a Kohen. Okay. Now, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, what will he do with this pasuk? How come he says that a Kohen can eat it? Doesn't this pasuk say only Levim can eat maaser rishon? V'idach ked Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, damar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, ב-24 מקומות יקראו כהנים לוויים, וזה אחד מהם, והכהנים הלוויים בני צדוק. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi already said that in 24 places, Kohanim are called Leviim. Even though it says Leviim, it's referring to Kohanim. One of them is in Yechezkel, where it says HaKohanim Halviim, and it's only talking about Kohanim, as it says the sons of Sadok, who are Kohanim, and yet it calls them Leviim. So too, therefore, the terms are interchangeable. Anytime it says Levi, it can also be referring to a Kohen. Kohen can't be referring to Levi, but every Levi can, or some Leviim, 24 places where it says Levi, it can refer to Kohanim. Okay, in fact, most of these places are in Sefer Devarim, which has its unique signon that always calls Kohanim HaKohanim Halviim, the Levitical Kohanim, which is a good point. It is calling Kohanim a subgroup within Leviim, and therefore the Kohanim also are able to eat maaser. All right, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva says, okay, fine, yeah, in other places, it's true, it says HaKohanim Halviim, but it doesn't say that term here, and you can't say that here, because Dichtiv, V'achatem oto bechol makom, mi she'achol lechlo bechol makom yasa kohen she'en yachol lechlo v'bet ha'kebarot, and a few pesukim later it says, that the Leviim can eat it in any place, not like Maaseh Sheni, that the Israel has to eat it only in Jerusalem. You can eat it in any place, anywhere you want, and that would be true for a Levi, but not for a Kohen, because a Kohen can't eat it in the cemetery. Kohen can't go in the cemetery. So see, you can't say any place for a Kohen. All right, good point. Sharp Rabbi Akiva. V'idach, what did Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah going to do with that? He will say, Kol hecha deba'eh tela ba'eh choma v'iyachile betumat aguf lalakeh. No, he says any place he wants, just because he can't go in the cemetery, that's for a different reason. Point is that he doesn't have to eat it in the walls of Jerusalem, like Maaser has to be in. And also is coming to tell you that if he does eat it while he's tameh, he will not get lashes. A Kohen, anyone who eats terumah while tameh will get lashes. This, not so. So that's what it's coming to exclude. That's what it's teaching. But it's not teaching that Kohanim cannot eat it. So that's what he does with it. All right, we end this part with a fantastic story. Rabbi ben Azariah was himself a Kohen. Oh, this would have been good to know this whole time, right? He's the one that says Kohanim can eat maaser, and he himself was a Kohen. Okay, not that we're ascribing any self-serving reason. He had Pesukim to back him up. Good. But anyway, there was a certain garden, and he would take maaser, he would go into the garden and take maaser rishon, not as a Levi, but as a Kohen. One day, Azal Rabbi Akiva hadre lepitcha lebe kibre. Rabbi Akiva did not want him taking the Maaser Rishon, and so therefore he closed up one entrance and he opened the entrance the other way towards the cemetery, so that in order to get into the garden, one would have to pass through the cemetery, and therefore Kohanim would not be able to pass, including Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and so he blocked it off from Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So you see, it's for this reason why I think this supports the idea that Rabbi Akiva does not allow, not like Rabbi Meir, he does not allow Kohanim to eat maaser. Okay, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was upset with this. Amar Akiva betarmilo v'ana hayeh. He says, Rabbi Akiva, remember you were a shepherd with your satchel, right, poor, and he's reminding him of his humble roots. He says, I will live. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was wealthy. So okay, so I don't have this maaser sheni. So he pulled out the wealthy card, right? I'm still wealthier than you. Your attack here does not affect me. I don't care about it. All right, so you see that this machloket between them was somewhat personal, and this is a sharp dig at him. Okay, and the last section now we get to Itemar mipnema kansu Leviim b'maaser. How come the Leviim were there was a penalty in the time of Ezra that the Leviim no longer can eat maaser? Now, this doesn't mean that the Leviim cannot eat maaser. It just means that they lost their exclusive right to the maaser, and another group of people will be able to eat the maaser from this penalty and on. So let's see two explanations. Peligi bar Rabbi Yochanan v'Sabya. אחד אמר שלא עלו בימי עזרא, ואחד אמר כדי שיסמכו כהנים עליו בימי טומאתן. So two opinions, one by Rabbi Yonatan and one by the elders, whichever one said which. One says because the Leviim in the time of Ezra did not return from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. We're going to see a pasuk that proves this in a minute. So therefore, as a penalty, the sages said, you know what? You don't want to come to the land? You lose your right to the Maaser Rishon in the land. The other one opinion says, no, it wasn't so much to penalize the Leviim, but rather to help the Kohanim. When Kohanim are tameh, they cannot eat terumah, and so then they are left destitute with no food because they can't own property. So what are they going to eat? In order to have that, allow them to have something to eat while they're tameh, we give them the Maaser Rishon, which can be eaten while tameh. Okay. According to the first opinion that says because they did not come and make aliyah, that's why they deserve a penalty. Fine. But according to the second one, that we want to help out the Kohanim when they're tameh, just because you want to help the Kohanim, you should give a fine to the Leviim. The Leviim didn't do anything wrong in this version, so you can just take away what's due to them to help someone else. Rather, actually, everyone agrees that it's a fine, primarily because they did not make aliyah in the time of Ezra. Once they made the penalty that the Leviim deserved for not moving back to Israel, then they said, well, what should we do with this money that we are taking away from this with the Maaser, that we are no longer granting to Leviim? So one says, let's give it to the poor people because they always need more, so fine. And the second opinion says, well, the Kohanim, they have a special need while they're tameh, they have nothing to eat, and they are poor, so let's grant it to them specifically. Good. Now, according to the first version, now this is going back to the story we just had. According to the one that says it was given to the poor, so that's why Rabbi Akiva closed up the entrance and opened it up to cemetery so that Kohanim would not go there, because he wanted it to be for the poor in general, and not like for someone who would be Elazar ben Azariah. You see, according to the second version, we say we wanted to give it to the poor, to the Kohanim, while they're tameh, because they are like poor. They're not really poor, but just that they can't eat terumah, so they get this instead. But once you permit Kohanim, you permit all Kohanim, no matter what. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah took advantage of that, so he's a Kohen. He wasn't poor. He could have found something else to eat. So Rabbi Akiva wanted to block off that entrance, literally block it off, and so that poor people can eat it, but not Kohanim. So that makes sense according to the first version. But according to the one who says then they decided to take it away from the Leviim and give it to Kohanim, so then why did he block off the entrance? Once they gave it to Kohanim, so rich or poor, they should be able to he's granted that right to get the maaser. Here's what Rabbi Akiva wanted to tell him. If you're coming and taking the maaser rishon as a knas, right, post knas, where it's given to all kohanim, fine, then I would like. But if you're coming because you think you have a right to it from the Torah, there I disagree with you. The distribution, the separation has to be given to Kohanim, and that has to be given to Leviim and not to Kohanim. And that was the subject of their machloket. What is the original deoraita law? So since he knew that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is coming not because he's poor, not because he's tameh, he was coming because of the deoraita law. That's why he stopped it up. That would explain it according to both. Okay, Minalan de la Sediku b'mei Ezra. How do we know that the Levim did not make Aliyah in the time of Ezra? Tichti va'ekbesem va'ekbesem el hanahar haba al ahava v'nachane sham v'yamim shelosha v'abina ba'am b'kohanim v'bnei Levi lo masati sham. Ezra says, I gathered them together by the river that runs to Havam. We camped there for 3 days. I looked at the people and I did not, and I looked at the Kohanim, but I did not find any Leviim. There you go. So he got upset. Amar Rav Chisda, בתחילה לא היו מעמידין שוטרים, אלא מן הלוויים, שנאמר, ושוטרים הלוויים לפניכם. עכשיו אין מעמידים שוטרים, אלא מישראל, שנאמר, ושוטרים הרבים בראשיכם. And so another part of this kanas is that at first the officers over the people were Leviim, as they had a lot of jobs. They were singers, they were guards, they were teachers, and they were also the officers. Because it says, and the officers, the Leviim, before you. But now that the Leviim did not answer to the call of duty, and they did not return to Israel, so now we only appoint officers from Israel, and the Leviim are out. As it is said among the officers that are many at your heads. It quotes this as if it's a pasuk, even though there actually is no pasuk that reads like this. Some suggest that the pasuk is a paraphrase of this one here. Havu lachem anashim chachamim onim yiduim l'shibtechem v'asimem berashechem, or here v'shoterim l'shibtechem. So here we're pointing people from the various tribes to be the shoterim. So it could be referring to here, and even though it doesn't say the word rabim in the pasuk, but it's hinting to it. It's paraphrasing because all these shoterim came from lots of different tribes, and so that could be what it's referring to. Okay, fascinating discussion. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.